Blue Origin's officials may exude confidence about New Glenn, their cutting edge, reusable rocket, making its highly anticipated debut by the end of 2024. Yet recent developments suggest that this timeline may be difficult to achieve. So, what's gone wrong with New Glenn? How did Jeff Bezos react? Let's find out on today's episode of Alpha Tech. Blue Origin's new orbital rocket, New Glenn, now stands tall and fully integrated on the test stand at Space Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It awaits a highly anticipated hot fire test, a critical milestone that will evaluate both its first and second stages working in unison. Although there have been reports suggesting that Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket has conducted a full-scale static fire test, from what I've observed through live videos from the site, there doesn't seem to be much activity, or perhaps it happened so briefly that we missed it. If anyone's got more info about this New Glenn test, please let us know in the comments. Sometimes your contributions become valuable sources of knowledge that foster some really insightful discussions. Thanks for that. All right, so completing a comprehensive test like this for New Glenn would mark a critical milestone in its journey toward the rocket's maiden flight. Under the leadership of Dave Limp, Blue Origin has already achieved significant milestones in New Glenn's development. On October 30th, the company transported successfully the enormous first stage of New Glenn to LC-36. In September, Blue Origin conducted a successful 15-second static fire test of New Glenn's second stage. Powered by two BE-3U engines running on liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, the stage generated a combined thrust of 173,000 pounds. This was the most comprehensive test disclosed by the company since the inception of the New Glenn program. However, do you imagine this progress came without setbacks? While these achievements mark tangible progress, Blue Origin still faces significant challenges that could jeopardize New Glenn's ability to launch on schedule. One of the most pressing issues is the incomplete state of several key rocket components. Recent photos reveal that critical sections remain unfinished, raising doubts about the rocket's readiness for the projected timeline. Doesn't it make you wonder why, despite having nearly the entire rocket integrated, Blue Origin has yet to conduct comprehensive testing? Comment yes if you also find this really weird for a company trying to compete with SpaceX. Why would a company striving to compete with SpaceX proceed at such a slow and confident pace? Is this meticulous caution for testing, or are there deeper technical setbacks anchoring the company and delaying a full-scale static fire test? Even if, by the time this video airs, Blue Origin has completed the static fire test, it still took 2 months for New Glenn to sit idly on the launch pad with no apparent progress. Previously, while stationary on the launch pad, the New Glenn rocket was lowered once. These delays and erratic movements hint at potential issues with the rocket itself or the launch support systems. If the problem lies with the vehicle, it could stem from the BE-4 engines, inconsistencies in hardware, or complications with the fueling system. Alternatively, the launch infrastructure might be at fault, potentially due to issues with fuel handling, the connection between the rocket and ground equipment, or safety protocols. Without an official explanation from Blue Origin, speculation abounds. However, both scenarios highlight a lack of readiness that tarnishes the company's image. This situation has amplified skepticism about Blue Origin's ability to compete in the modern space race. Elon, CEO of SpaceX, has not missed the opportunity to highlight this disparity. On November 21st, the same day New Glenn got rolled out to the pad, Musk tweeted, "How time flies," alongside an image of himself and Jeff Bezos from a meeting 2 decades ago. Elon's caption referenced advice he had given Bezos at the time, which he claimed had been ignored. Criticism of Blue Origin's work ethic is not new. In 2018, Jason Davis, a former Blue Origin official, remarked, "Blue is kind of lazy compared to SpaceX." Today, that sentiment resonates even more as SpaceX continues to achieve milestones. Last quarter alone, SpaceX completed 2 Starship missions, underscoring its dominance while New Glenn stays grounded. Beyond the technical hurdles, regulatory barriers also pose a significant threat. Blue Origin has yet to secure the necessary launch license, an essential step for gaining approval for its maiden flight. This licensing process involves rigorous reviews, and even if the rocket is technically ready, the absence of regulatory clearance could lead to additional delays. The uncertainty surrounding the licensing timeline adds to the complexity, potentially extending the wait despite advancements in rocket preparation. Honestly, it's nearly impossible to predict when New Glenn's inaugural flight will actually happen. The rockets face so many delays that Blue Origin's original promises seem like distant memories. Just this year alone, the company projected a November launch date, only to later revise its forecast to a vague before the end of the year. However, even this adjusted timeline seems more like speculative optimism than a concrete plan, as no official announcement has yet been made. Blue Origin, a rocket company founded by Jeff Bezos, plans to use New Glenn's first flight to test its proprietary Blue Ring hardware. The system is designed to deliver payloads to precise orbital positions after deployment, a critical feature for its commercial and government clients. Moreover, this mission serves as the first of two mandatory flights needed for certification by the Space Force to handle national security missions. At its core, New Glenn is a heavy lift rocket powered by 7 BE-4s, which collectively generate an impressive 3.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. This immense power surpasses that of other rockets, such as ULA's Vulcan Centaur, which also uses BE-4 engines, but integrates only two. In addition to its payload delivery capabilities, Blue Origin's got ambitious plans to make New Glenn reusable. The company intends to land the rocket's first stage on a recovery in the Atlantic after launch, a method kind of like SpaceX's Falcon 9 booster landings. However, attempting such a maneuver on a maiden flight is an audacious gamble given the complexity and risks involved. SpaceX's own journey to perfect booster landings illustrates how challenging this task can be. It wasn't until its 20th flight that SpaceX achieved its first successful Falcon 9 booster landing, following numerous iterations and failures. Blue Origin's decision to attempt this on New Glenn's very first flight introduces significant risks, as even a minor error could derail the program and cause substantial delays. Reusability is a key feature in New Glenn's strategy to compete with SpaceX on cost and launch frequency. However, it's worth noting that Blue Origin is entering this race years behind SpaceX, which has already established itself as the leader in reusables. For Blue Origin to bridge this gap, it must execute flawlessly, something that will be exceedingly difficult given the current stage of its program. But in reality, this gap is inevitable due to the fundamental differences in the approach and development strategies of SpaceX and Blue Origin. These differences have shaped the divergent trajectories of the two space rivals in the commercial space race. While SpaceX has surged ahead with its bold test fast, fail fast, fix fast philosophy, Blue Origin's more cautious approach has left it struggling to keep pace. SpaceX's philosophy fosters a culture of relentless innovation. By conducting frequent tests and embracing the risk of failure, the company identifies flaws early and implements rapid fixes, creating a virtuous cycle of continuous improvement. Take the Starship program as an example. Within a few months, SpaceX conducted numerous pressure tests, static fires, and flight tests, even learning from spectacular failures like the SN8 and SN9 prototypes. These so-called failures were stepping stones, providing critical data that propelled SpaceX toward groundbreaking progress in record time. In contrast, Blue Origin opts for a meticulous and risk-averse strategy, prioritizing exhaustive analysis and planning before attempting major milestones. While this reduces the likelihood of catastrophic early failures, it significantly slowed the company's overall progress. The development of New Glenn, for instance, began in 2012 but has yet to achieve its first orbital flight. With limited testing compared to SpaceX, Blue Origin has missed opportunities to discover and address design issues early, prolonging its development timeline. But despite this, Jeff Bezos believes his company, Blue Origin, will one day become a bigger company than Amazon. I think it's going to be the best business that I've ever been involved in, but it's going to take a while, Bezos said Wednesday at the New York Times DealBook Summit. Amazon, which Bezos founded back in '94, has a market value of $2.3 trillion. Blue Origin, which Bezos founded in 2000, has never disclosed a valuation. He solely owns and funds Blue Origin through sales of his Amazon stock. Blue Origin for years has been flying tourists and research to the edge of space on short jaunts, including Bezos himself. The company's projects reach from rockets and spacecraft to space stations and lunar landers. Its next major milestone is to launch the towering New Glenn rocket to orbit, which Bezos said the company is very, very close to attempting. Bezos complimented SpaceX as very good competitors in the space industry. Similar to OpenAI CEO Sam Altman earlier in the day, Bezos noted that he's not concerned about Musk's close relationship with President-elect Trump. I take at face value what has been said, that Elon is not going to use his political power to advantage his own companies or disadvantage his competitors, Bezos said. The year 2024 might be one of the most eventful years for SpaceX, as the company has continuously achieved significant milestones in the development of its Starship program, as well as new records in the Falcon and Starlink programs. Undeniably, these achievements represent major turning points, solidifying SpaceX as a leading space company and earning it the title of the highest valued company on the planet. However, alongside these accomplishments, 2024 has also been a year filled with numerous legal challenges surrounding SpaceX's rocket launch operations. The lawsuits vary in scale, but the most notable conflict involves SpaceX and Elon clashing with the region famously known as Silicon Valley, the global hub of high-tech innovation. Recently, this tension reached its peak when several members of the California Coastal Commission voted against allowing SpaceX to conduct more launches at the site. Their reasoning cited Elon's political statements. This decision enraged Musk, who's long held a critical view of government officials. Consequently, a lawsuit has been filed, with SpaceX arguing that members of the California's Coastal Commission violated Musk's right to free speech and overstepped the commission's authority. Now, no further details about the lawsuit have been disclosed, but many believe the California Coastal Commission may be prioritizing personal biases over the broader interests of the United States. Previously, Elon's relationship with California has been marked by both mutual benefit and mounting tensions over the years. Musk established SpaceX in 2002 in Hawthorne, part of the greater Los Angeles area, and the company quickly became a cornerstone of the state's aerospace industry. Over the years, California has supported Musk's ventures with substantial incentives, including more than $3.2 billion in direct and indirect subsidies, as well as favorable adjustments to regulatory and market mechanisms to accommodate his businesses. These incentives reflected California's commitment to fostering innovation and maintaining its position as a hub for cutting-edge technology and industry. For much of the time, Musk's operations brought immense economic and reputational benefit to the state. Tesla's Fremont factory became one of the most productive car manufacturing facilities in the U.S., while SpaceX revitalized the aerospace sector in SoCal, creating thousands of jobs and spurring entrepreneurial activity in related industries. However, the relationship began to sour as Elon clashed with state officials over regulatory frameworks, labor policies, and most notably, pandemic restrictions. These disputes highlighted a growing divide between Elon's vision for his companies and California's political and economical approach. Despite the earlier cooperation, Musk increasingly voiced his dissatisfaction with the state, criticizing policies as overly restrictive and dismissive of the needs of businesses. The growing friction eventually led in Musk's decision to relocate the headquarters of both Tesla and SpaceX to Texas, a state with fewer regulations and lower taxes. This move represents Elon's disappointment with California at the time. However, it seems that even a few such companies have not been enough to make California's top officials wary of Elon Musk. On the contrary, they've criticized him and implemented various measures to hinder the growth of his companies, particularly under the Biden administration. But a major blow is about to be dealt to them as the political landscape has shifted. Elon is now one of the key allies of President-elect Donald Trump. Under Trump's administration, SpaceX is certain to get maximum support to unleash its full potential. What can the new government do to support SpaceX? First, Trump and Elon are likely to address the unresolved issues in California, specifically the refusal by the California Coastal Commission to allow SpaceX to conduct more launches despite clearance already being granted by the Space Force. Once Trump takes office, he's expected to introduce a range of measures to curb opposition from Governor Gavin Newsom and organizations like the California Coastal Commission. These actions will not only alleviate the political pressures placed on SpaceX by these entities, but also foster a more favorable environment for the company's operations. For example, Trump could enact federal policies that limit the power of space agencies to interfere with space projects, particularly those endorsed by the U.S. Space Force or other defense agencies. This would make it more challenging for the California Coastal Commission to obstruct SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket launches. In addition, Trump might leverage economic strategies, such as reducing federal funding or imposing stricter support conditions to compel these agencies to align with his administration's directives. This scenario would not only enable SpaceX to operate more smoothly, but also highlight the complex interplay between politics and business amidst federal and state-level conflicts. Beyond addressing regulatory hurdles, Trump's administration is likely to introduce a friendlier regulatory environment benefiting Elon's 6 companies, including SpaceX and the Starlink satellite network. Previously, Elon had already asked Trump to hire employees from SpaceX as top government officials, including the DoD, which is one of the company's biggest customers. Such a move could position Musk to more directly weigh in on regulatory issues regarding Starship, a transformative reusable rocket that's being developed by SpaceX to transport people and cargo to the moon and Mars. Musk has repeatedly expressed frustration with the regulatory environment that SpaceX and other launch providers must navigate, including that Starship's most recent test flight was grounded by the Federal Aviation Administration for weeks for what the rocket company called a superfluous environmental analysis. It's not unreasonable to think that there could be either money or regulatory regime lifted to benefit the pace of Starship development. Casey Dreyer, who's the chief of space policy at the Planetary Society, told Space.com, the extent to which regulations surrounding Starship get relaxed, as well as the direction of the U.S. space policy, will ultimately depend on where Elon falls in terms of his influence within the Trump White House. It's hard to extrapolate that. Trump's first term from 2017 to 2021 notably included the initiation of the Artemis program to return humans to the moon for the first time since the Apollo days, championed by then Vice President Mike Pence as the chair of the National Space Council and space policy expert Scott Pace as executive secretary. Trump himself spearheaded the establishment of the Space Force, the first new military service created since 1947, which he claimed is one of his proudest accomplishments of his first term in office. Trump said he would strengthen U.S. military defenses in space by creating a Space National Guard, an idea that lawmakers in Congress have been proposing since 2021 but have yet to get enough support to pass. In recent months, Musk has vowed to identify $2 trillion in savings from the federal budget as the head of a new government efficiency commission, which he said will ensure taxpayer money is spent in a good way. A rich source of opportunity for cost-cutting and conflict of interest for Elon could be NASA's massive space launch system, the centerpiece of the Artemis program that debuted in 2022 when it launched the uncrewed Artemis 1 flyby mission of the moon. The mega rocket, that's not reusable and can launch only once every 2 years, costs roughly $4 billion a launch, quadruple initial estimates, making it effectively unaffordable for future Artemis missions. Meanwhile, the program's Orion crew capsules faced issues with its heat shield that a recent audit determined threatens the safety of the crew, and with it, the timeline of NASA's goal to land humans on the moon in 2027. And with SpaceX on track to lower the cost of a single Starship flight to less than $10 million, SLS and the broader architecture of Artemis are deemed to get a hard look, even as NASA Associate Admin Jim Free urged the incoming administration to maintain the current plans. Historically, SLS and Orion development received substantial funding from a broad coalition. The program supports more than 69,000 jobs nationwide as of 2019. If Elon intends to halt SLS development, he'll likely be contending with internal political support from Republican congressional representatives in red states like Alabama, home to NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, where large parts of the SLS are being developed, along with Florida and Texas. The new administration's driving force for changes to the Artemis program will be to maintain U.S. leadership in space, particularly to counter China. Dreyer said China's space program has developed rapidly in recent years to include its own version of Starship, aiming to put astronauts on the moon by the end of the decade and build a crewed research outpost on the moon in the next decade in partnership with Russia. China has also moved up its timeline for bringing samples on Mars to Earth, perhaps as soon as 2031, which would be well before the joint NASA-European Space Agency Mars Sample Return (MSR) program does so. MSR, which has an entirely independent launch and landing architecture to Artemis, is in the midst of a major overhaul after being plagued by skyrocketing costs and schedule overruns. SpaceX is one of the 7 companies that submitted a proposal to NASA outlining a simpler mission plan using Starship. It makes little sense to spend billions of dollars on an independent robotic sample return mission when astronauts can bring the samples inside Starship. I see a very dim future right now for MSR as an independent project managed by NASA, Dreyer said. A logical, perhaps cost-effective alternative may be for Elon to somehow include Starship in the MSR program, a move that would help him advance his lifelong goal of helping humanity settle on Mars. Of course, all the aforementioned points remain speculative as there are still many uncertainties. However, one thing seems certain. Isaacman is poised to be the new admin of Trump once the Trump administration takes the helm in the United States. It's exciting to anticipate the forthcoming changes that are bound to unfold. Florida, the holy land of the world's aerospace industry, once shone brightly during NASA's era with the Saturn V and Space Shuttle. It was thought that the glory would fade when those vehicles retired, but SpaceX emerged and elevated that legacy, launching more frequently, landing continuously, and particularly with superior rocket reusability. SpaceX has not only inherited but surpassed NASA's achievements, continuously creating shocks in the global space industry. Recently, once again, SpaceX just did something in Florida that was more mind-blowing than we think. Located in a prime position and dubbed the epicenter of globally impactful rocket launches, Florida's always maintained an allure that keeps the region bustling. One of the critical factors behind this dynamic environment is SpaceX. With its rockets and spacecraft like Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and Dragon, the majority of launches in Florida are handled by these vehicles. In 2024, SpaceX conducted an impressive 115 launches with a 99% success rate. Among these, 76 originated from Florida's coast, accounting for 66% of the total launches. This number is expected to rise further in the coming year as demand for Falcon 9 missions continues to grow. Additionally, the increasing requirements from various clients, especially NASA, could result in such a dense launch schedule for Florida that it risks getting overwhelmed. However, this might not even represent the full extent of what SpaceX can achieve. By mid-2024, the company had already initiated steps to secure permits for 44 Starship launches and landings on Florida's coast. This is an incredibly ambitious goal, but it's not been without challenges. SpaceX competitors, Blue Origin and ULA, who also operate and develop rockets in the region, have raised objections. They filed complaints with the FAA, arguing that SpaceX's high launch frequency could interfere with their projects and demanded compensation in case of any issues. These tensions appear to have delayed a decision on the permit application for 44 Starship launches in Florida. To date, no additional info has been revealed about the FAA's investigation into this matter or any resolution among the involved parties. But after all, SpaceX's authorization to ramp up launch operations in Florida may only be a matter of time as the company remains confident in its negotiation capabilities. This confidence is evident in its preparations to establish a new Starship empire on Florida's legendary Space Coast. In addition to the launch tower, partially constructed since 2022, SpaceX has recently intensified efforts to complete this structure and more. The second Starship launch tower at Starbase was stacked in record time, just 4 months after the modules were prepared at Kennedy. Steel platforms used to build and prepare the tower have returned to Roberts Road, the same location as before. At least 2 additional towers may be constructed at Cape Canaveral, one at SLC-37, pending environmental review approval to support launch operations, and then another at LC-39A to accommodate Starship and Super Heavy landings. SpaceX is expected to build even more launch pads in Florida as Starship's launch cadence increases. With components ready, SpaceX plans to rapidly prepare construction and launch sites to meet its goal of launching Starship from Cape Canaveral next year. Production tents are also expected to quickly rise across Florida. A new tent's currently in construction at SpaceX's Roberts Road facility, replacing the SLC-40 tower construction area and extending all the way to what's intended to be a mega bay foundation. This tent measures approximately 40 meters wide and 140 meters long, surpassing the older Starbase tents, which were 35 by 114 meters. The new tent could serve various purposes, such as assembling new tower sections, orbital launch pad components in a controlled environment, or even marking the return of Starship production to Florida. If Starship production resumes, SpaceX might initially bring critical manufacturing processes to Kennedy Space Center. With its 40% bigger floor area and higher edges compared to older Starbase tents, the new tent could make constructing nose cones or stacking ring sections much easier. Although SpaceX would still need a large bay for fully stacking a spacecraft, they could leverage lessons learned at Starbase to start operations within this new tent. SpaceX previously constructed 3 main tents at Starbase in just 3 months, from January to March 2020. If they plan to replicate this at Cape Canaveral, new facilities could be operational quickly. Adding just one more large tent would provide more than 90% coverage of the old Starbase tent space. Significant expansion is also planned for the Roberts Road area, particularly to the north of the land acquired by SpaceX. Phase 1 planning documents released back in May reveal preparations for substantial development of SpaceX's operations at Kennedy. Elon, SpaceX's founder and CEO, has stated that Starship's expected to launch from Cape Canaveral by next year. With ongoing efforts at Roberts Road and new expansion projects, Starship is poised to become a prominent feature of KSC, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and the whole Space Coast in the near future. However, legal challenges remain a significant hurdle. SpaceX faces disputes and tensions with various local agencies, such as the California Coastal Commission, which recently denied SpaceX's request to up their rocket launches from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. California's Coastal Commission, or CCC, has positioned itself within the broader stage of global geopolitics, entangling itself in the great power competition between the U.S., China, and Russia. Unfortunately, instead of supporting America's national security strategy, the CCC's inadvertently hindered its execution by imposing constraints that impact critical space capabilities. The continuation of these restrictions puts the U.S.'s response to emerging threats at risk. SpaceX has long been recognized as a vital national and global interest. Without access to essential orbital capabilities, foundational strategies of the United States Space Force are jeopardized. Critical systems such as low Earth orbit weather satellites, intelligence platforms, global communication networks, and advanced satellite constellations rely heavily on the Vandenberg Space Force Base on California's west coast. The CCC's limitations on launch activities from this key spaceport endanger national security and could result in strategic and human losses. Failing to increase launch rates at Vandenberg hands a strategic advantage to adversaries like Russia and China, allowing them to claim victories without expending any military resources. For over 30 years, the U.S. has been the dominant spacefaring nation, ensuring free and open access to space. This dominance has fostered a thriving global economy dependent on space-based capabilities like GPS, satellite communications, global broadcasting, weather tracking, and remote sensing. However, emerging threats to these capabilities mean that space can no longer be taken for granted. Adversaries such as China and Russia have developed a range of capabilities designed to neutralize U.S. assets in space. These include ground-based anti-satellite missiles, co-orbital attacks, jamming, spoofing, and directed energy weapons. In response, Space Force has prioritized a strategy of resilience through proliferation, incorporating commercial space systems into its operations to ensure redundancy. This approach maximizes flexibility in countering rapidly evolving threats. Space Force's mission is to deter conflict in space and avoid catastrophic scenarios that would have military, economic, and societal ramifications worldwide. With the increasing vulnerability of space operations, it's critical to safeguard these capabilities against external threats. The potential consequences of losing key space assets could be devastating, underscoring the urgency of bolstering defensive capabilities and maintaining unrestricted access to space, something Vandenberg uniquely provides. Vandenberg's coastal location allows for southward launches into polar orbits without overflying populated areas, making it irreplaceable. This spaceport already plays a pivotal role in addressing threats to U.S. and allied security. Over the past 5 years, Space Force has dramatically transformed military space operations, embracing rapid deployment of satellite constellations and integrating commercial systems into its structure. These innovations have driven a surge in SpaceX launches, highlighting the necessity of increasing annual launches from Vandenberg to over 100 to meet growing military and commercial demands. While the CCC technically cannot deny federal operations like Vandenberg's launches, its stance has raised questions about SpaceX's compliance with state permits. The commission argues that many of SpaceX's launches serve private enterprises such as Elon's Starlink rather than government payloads. However, this view fails to account for the dual-use nature of these missions. Commercial systems like Starlink and TAC-SRT are integral to Space Force operations, supporting both military and humanitarian objectives. To resolve this impasse, the CCC must work with federal agencies to establish a mutually agreeable framework, ensuring that environmental and wildlife considerations are met without compromising national security. This is particularly important as commercial and military space systems become increasingly intertwined. Governor Gavin Newsom of California recognizes the strategic importance of Vandenberg and its contributions to U.S. security. The CCC must align with these priorities, acknowledging that space capabilities are no longer merely commercial ventures, but critical components of national defense. Balancing environmental stewardship with the nation's security needs is essential to preserving America's strategic advantage in space. Considering all this, we're confident that the California Coastal Commission's final decision will inevitably have to change, not only to accommodate the increased Falcon 9 launches, but also to support the future development of the world's largest rocket, Starship. Indeed, since the beginning of this year, U.S. military agencies have demonstrated a significant demand for the heavy lift Starship. General Saltzman's presence at the Starship test flights is more than a courtesy visit. It signals a strategic assessment of how next-generation private space technologies could revolutionize military logistics and operational capabilities. Starship's potential as a global rapid transport system is particularly revolutionary. Traditional military airlift platforms like the C-17 Globemaster III typically require hours or even days to transport personnel and equipment across continents. In contrast, Starship could theoretically deliver military assets to any global location in under an hour, fundamentally transforming military response and deployment strategies. The rocket's massive payload capacity, estimated at around 100 to 150 metric tons to low Earth orbit, opens unprecedented possibilities for military satellite deployment and space-based infrastructure. Unlike current launch systems that are constrained by payload limitations, Starship could enable the rapid deployment of large, complex satellite networks or entire space-based communication and reconnaissance systems in a single launch. From a technological perspective, Starship represents a paradigm shift in rocket engineering. Its fully reusable design dramatically reduces launch costs compared to traditional expendable rockets. For the military, this means more cost-effective satellite launches and space operations, potentially allowing for more frequent and comprehensive space-based intelligence, communication, and surveillance capabilities. Space Force's interest also extends beyond immediate military applications. By monitoring Starship's development, they are positioning themselves to potentially leverage a technology that could redefine space transportation and military logistics in the coming decades. The presence of high-profile individuals like President-elect Donald Trump alongside military leadership and SpaceX's Elon Musk underscores the strategic importance of this technology, suggesting that Starship is being viewed not just as a technological marvel, but as a potential game-changer in national security infrastructure. While the military is maintaining a cautious approach without immediate commitments, the exploration of Starship's capabilities indicates a forward-looking strategy. Space Force is essentially conducting a live, real-world evaluation of a technology that could fundamentally transform military space and transportation capabilities. The collaboration between a private space company and military leadership also highlights a broader trend of increased public-private partnerships in advanced technological development. SpaceX's innovative approach, combined with military strategic planning, could accelerate technological breakthroughs that have implications far beyond traditional space and defense sectors. As Starship continues its rigorous testing and development, its potential applications are garnering attention far beyond the realm of space exploration. The military's focus on the technology suggests a forward-looking strategy aimed at leveraging Starship's capabilities for rapid troop transport, satellite deployment, and even the establishment of critical infrastructure in congested or remote areas. With its ability to carry massive payloads across vast distances at unprecedented speeds, Starship could become a game-changer for global logistics, enabling rapid response to emerging crises and creating new pathways for global commerce. Starship has generated immense excitement, emerging as a potential breakthrough that promises to revolutionize spaceflight. SpaceX's goal is to increase the launch frequency from a few hundred times per year to several hundred times monthly. However, Starship alone will find it challenging to achieve this speed. To realize this bold plan, an army of Starships will need a large-scale launch tower system to support and optimize the rocket launch process. Let's explore the real reasons why SpaceX created the Starship launch towers and how their numbers could grow exponentially in the future. Now, SpaceX has 3 Starship launch towers, although only one of them is in use. However, shortly, this number is expected to skyrocket with the rapid development of Starship. The first launch tower to be discussed is the one at Starbase, which has undergone 6 Starship test launches so far and could potentially be used for the 7th, even the 8th flight early next year, as Starship has yet to perfect catching both stages with its chopstick arms. This is the first launch and catch tower for Starship ever used by SpaceX. It serves as a guiding structure for one of the most critical support systems for Starship launches. Following lessons learned, SpaceX quickly moved forward to build a second launch tower located right next to the first one at Starbase. This tower was assembled in record time, taking only 4 months to complete after the modules were prepared at the Kennedy Space Center. At first glance, the two towers appear similar, but upon closer inspection, the second tower is slightly taller by just over 2 meters. There are also some differences between the new and old towers due to modifications to certain components. For instance, the water deluge system and launch pad systems have been replaced with new structures, as mentioned in previous episodes. More importantly, Starship's been upgraded to a new version called Starship V2. This version contributes to changes in the launch and catch tower system. Starship V2 is slightly taller than V1. However, even when observing the prototypes currently being built, it may be challenging to notice any significant height difference. One thing we do know for sure is that the Block 2 booster will be equipped with Raptor 3 engines. While Raptor 2 provides 230 tons of thrust, Raptor 3 increases that by 50 tons to 280 tons. With a significant thrust increase between Raptor 2 and 3, the new booster design will be in a class of its own, boasting nearly 10,000 tons of thrust, approximately 3 times that of Saturn V and 14 times that of Falcon 9. Imagine 14 Falcon 9 boosters firing simultaneously. That's the power of the Super Heavy Block 2. It's highly likely that Starship V2 will also feature at SpaceX's third Starship launch tower at LC-39A in Florida. In fact, this tower predates the two towers mentioned earlier, having been constructed in late 2019. However, its progress was halted due to changes in rocket design and internal competition between the Texas and Florida sites. Ultimately, priority for the Starship program was given to the Texas site, where the launch and catch systems were completed first. It wasn't until the middle of last year that we saw some renewed activity around Starship Tower at LC-39A. While the company has only demolished the base structure so far, this signals the emergence of a new architecture, possibly featuring a flame trench system similar to the new launch site at Starbase. Furthermore, SpaceX has begun expanding Starship's presence at LC-39A. In an environmental impact statement for Starship operations at LC-39A, SpaceX proposed building a separate catch tower located farther south than the integration tower. This setup could allow the booster and ship to be caught on separate towers. Alternatively, the ship could be caught while the booster remains on the launch pad, reducing the risk of booster damage. Meaning that at LC-39A alone, SpaceX could have 2 towers dedicated to Starship launches and landings. This aligns with the company's stated goal of conducting 44 launches and landing, including both ground pads and drone ships. If investigations proceed smoothly, launches from Florida could happen by middle of next year, as Elon previously announced. At this point, have I missed mentioning any of SpaceX's launch towers? Pause the video and comment below to see how many SpaceX launch towers you can recall. Don't forget to like our video if you're enjoying it. So in total, we have 4 towers that could be operational next year. Components of the new towers at LC-39A have appeared more and more at SpaceX's factory. However, that's still not enough. SpaceX has plans to build yet another launch tower. In March, SpaceX proposed taking over Space Launch Complex 37 SLC-37 in Cape Canaveral from the U.S. Space Force. If SpaceX is not permitted to use SLC-37, the company may build an entirely new launch pad named Space Launch Complex 50. If this becomes SpaceX's chosen path, SLC-50 will be constructed on undeveloped land north of SLC-37 and south of SpaceX's primary pad for Falcon 9 launch rockets at Space Launch Complex 40. The number of Starship launch towers could expand even further due to demand from the military. The U.S. military is planning thousands of SpaceX flights each year, which means they may need up to 100 Mechazilla towers. Naturally, this could also lead to the establishment of numerous Starship launch sites worldwide, including potentially in California. In California, some local government organizations have been resisting the increase in Falcon 9 launches by SpaceX, citing concerns about the environmental impacts of rocket launches in that region. However, not everybody feels that way. Meanwhile, other local officials are singing praises over SpaceX's economic impact. Data released by Cameron County Judge Eddie Trevino Jr. late last month noted that SpaceX created more than 3,400 full-time company and contractor jobs and 21,000 indirect jobs across the region. Trevino said SpaceX has positively affected Cameron County through increased tourism and job opportunities. We look forward to additional growth and investment in the future as SpaceX carries on their mission to explore space, return us to the moon, and colonize Mars, Trevino said in a statement. That's why time is the only thing SpaceX needs to establish itself across various territories. However, one question that might puzzle many is why SpaceX needed to build towers for catching or launching rockets in the first place. They already figured out how to land Falcon 9 rockets using landing legs, a feat that no other space company has been able to replicate even after many years. In December of 2015, the first stage of Falcon 9 successfully landed on solid ground at Cape Canaveral, an unprecedented event. Just a couple months later, in April of 2016, the first stage of Falcon 9 landed for the first time on a drone ship out at sea. So, why does SpaceX feel the need to take things to the next level when they're already on top? If Super Heavy's booster were to land on a landing pad in the same way as the early Starship test flights did, it would require a significant effort to get it back onto the launch pad, even if the distance wasn't great. First, they would need both the mobile crane and the massive crawler transporter used at Starbase to move the rocket. The crane would have to lift the booster, place it onto the transporter, then move the entire setup to the launch pad. Afterward, they would need to use the crane again to lift the booster back onto the launch pad and then return both massive machines to the hangar. In addition to being heavy, expensive, and complex, landing legs themselves can be very fragile. If we take the Falcon 9 as an example, the rocket is light but comes down with a lot of force that needs to be absorbed by the legs. SpaceX doesn't use shock absorbers in the Falcon's legs, but they do use sort of a crumple zone to absorb the energy. SpaceX calls these crush cores. They're honeycomb-style cartridges inside the legs that compress on landing and have to be replaced after every landing. For the Falcon 9, replacing crush cores isn't a big deal because many other components also need refurbishment between flights. However, for Starship and Super Heavy that demand rapid reusability and feature clean-burning methane engines, stopping to inspect and refurb the legs would be too much, particularly when we reach Elon's ideal cadence for the Starship, which is 3 launches per day per booster. So, if SpaceX can completely eliminate the need for landing legs, the process becomes significantly streamlined. Instead of needing cranes, transport vehicles, and refurbs, the booster can land directly on the waiting arms of Mechazilla. From there, it can be immediately repositioned on the launch pad and prepared for its next flight. This doesn't just save time, but also cuts costs and improves reliability. Now that we understand why Elon's pursuing this design, the next question is, how does it work? The core of the launch landing tower is a 145 meters tall steel structure. The tower features 3 mechanical arms. One of these is the quick disconnect arm, which serves as an umbilical connection for propellant and acts as a mid-rocket stabilizer. The other 2 arms are the chopsticks, which work together to pick up and catch the rockets. The chopsticks are 36-meter-long tubular steel beams. Mechanically, these arms move up and down along a rail track on the tower powered by a super heavy-duty winch system called a drawworks. The drawworks, located at the bottom of the tower, are powered by 4 electric motors that generate 6,000 horsepower. This system was adapted from oil rigs where similar winches are used to lower and retrieve drill equipment. The pinching motion of the chopsticks is controlled by hydraulic cylinders. The landing sequence begins at an altitude of about 1,800 meters. At this point, the Super Heavy booster initiates its final landing burn, kind of like the Falcon 9. The booster descends at an angle rather than vertically to maximize atmospheric drag and stability. Grid fins, similar to those on Falcon 9, help guide the booster during this phase. As the booster approaches 800 meters above ground, 6 of its 9 engines shut down, leaving 3 Raptors to perform the final approach. These engines are mounted on a gimbal system that allows them to swivel and steer the rocket. At a height of 65 meters, 2 more engines shut down, leaving just 1 to control the hover. The booster hovers for about 5 seconds while the chopsticks clamp onto 2 pins located just underneath the grid fence. This hovering maneuver is a departure from what most observers had anticipated. Earlier concepts imagined the booster coming down with force, with the chopsticks absorbing the impact. Instead, the SpaceX render shows a controlled hover and precise catch. The chopsticks move very little during this maneuver, relying on their rails to absorb the weight and stabilize the booster. This method is significantly different from the suicide burn technique used by Falcon 9, where the booster lands hard to minimize fuel use. Falcon 9 boosters can't hover because their engines are too powerful to throttle down enough for a steady descent. Super Heavy, however, is designed with enough control and precision to hover momentarily, making the chopstick catch possible. Given the combination of advanced grid fins, gimbaled engines, and hover capability, the Super Heavy booster should have no trouble hitting its precise target. Falcon 9, for instance, lands with remarkable accuracy, often within centimeters of the center of its launching pad. even on a floating drone ship in rough seas. Space travel's always been a testament to human ingenuity, but it comes with formidable challenges, especially in the development of reusable heat shield technology. The clearest example is NASA's Space Shuttle legacy, which required thousands of handcrafted components and extensive inspections after each return to Earth, making frequent and affordable space travel seem unattainable. Starship aims to address the cost challenges of heat shields as part of its mission to make space travel more economical. However, recent tests of Starship's heat shield have revealed harsh realities. It's still not entirely reliable. Even Elon has admitted that the heat shield during re-entry poses the biggest technical challenge SpaceX currently faces, underscoring the inadequacy of previous heat shield solutions for rapid reuse. In this context, Sierra Space has achieved a groundbreaking milestone with the heat shields for its Dream Chaser spacecraft. The company's leadership proudly claims that this innovation will significantly enhance the reusability of its thermal protection system. Whether these shields outperform Starship remains to be seen, but Sierra Space is confident they surpass NASA's 80s era technology. The new tiles installed on the Dream Chaser orbital vehicle use a combination of silicon carbide and carbon fibers, offering high durability, robust protection, and stable flight dynamics. Moreover, new manufacturing techniques make producing these tiles far less labor-intensive. Set to be used on Sierra Space's Dream Chaser, the first commercial winged spacecraft designed to carry cargo to low Earth orbit, this innovation is poised for its true test with Dream Chaser's maiden launch. Exciting, isn't it? Imagine witnessing a commercial spacecraft delivering cargo to the ISS, evoking the golden age of the space shuttle. If you're just as thrilled as I am, comment yes below. Don't forget to like this video to motivate us to keep bringing you fresh content every day. Confident in its technology as it may be, Dream Chaser is not without challenges, particularly delays, an issue familiar across the aerospace industry. Dream Chaser is based on NASA's HL-20 design concept from the 90s. During a 2013 test, the spacecraft failed to deploy part of its landing gear, skidding along the runway. Since then, the company has focused on a cargo version intended to complete 7 missions by delivering 5,400 kilos of supplies to the ISS, with operations originally slated to start last year. Sierra Space signed a memorandum of understanding with Spaceport America to utilize its 3,600-meter runway in southern New Mexico. The company is also expanding the list of compatible landing sites for Dream Chaser, which includes NASA's shuttle landing facility at Kennedy Space Center, along with airports in Alabama, Japan, and Spaceport Cornwall in the UK. However, Sierra Space has already missed its original launch schedule by nearly 2 years. Worse yet, spokesperson Alex Walker recently announced that the long-anticipated maiden cargo flight of Dream Chaser spacecraft has been postponed to May of next year. This inaugural flight will be carried out by the spacecraft named Tenacity. While Tenacity was delivered to NASA's Neil Armstrong Test Facility as early as May, ongoing tests appear to have revealed issues requiring more work. The company is taking extra time to refine the spacecraft, ensuring it's fully prepped for its first mission. This cautious approach is understandable given the high expectations surrounding Dream Chaser. Not only are Sierra Space officials and NASA eagerly anticipating its flight, but the public is also looking forward to witnessing what many see as a symbolic return to the glory days of winged spacecraft. Such heightened expectations have likely prompted the company and its engineers to adopt a meticulous approach to testing. While delays are disappointing, they're not without merit if they result in a flawless maiden flight. Transparency from Sierra Space, including regular updates on the spacecraft's progress, help maintain confidence in the project. Despite the wait, Sierra Space recently gave an update on the progress of its Shooting Star cargo modules, which are nearing completion, demonstrating the company's readiness to accelerate the pace of future launches. Once the first Dream Chaser takes off, subsequent cargo missions could proceed quickly, depending, of course, on the condition of the Dream Chaser after its return to Earth. Alongside the successful testing of Tenacity, Sierra Space is also constructing the second spaceplane called Reverence. It's fortunate that for the first time, we are witnessing the emergence of the second spaceplane being gradually perfected right within the factory. Dream Chaser Reverence is currently in production along with its Shooting Star cargo module at our Dream Factory in Colorado. This is the second spaceplane in our Dream Chaser fleet, which will help carry cargo to the space station. We designed each vehicle for 15 missions, but we think we're going to be well above that, Vice said. Tenacity is the first. Reverence is going to the factory, so we think we're going to be able to service that, not only for NASA, but long-term in visions of how we think about commercialization of the workforce. Sierra Space announced the current plan to fly Tenacity on 4 initial flights, with the 5th being the debut of Reverence. Truly, it's an ongoing effort in line with Sierra Space's long-term goals. They truly deserve the moniker of the second SpaceX that we've always anticipated. However, what I'm most eager to know is the crew carrying capability of the spacecraft. After all, the real dream is to turn Dream Chaser into a human transport vehicle. Regarding Reverence, we haven't seen any confirmation that it'll be the second version of the spaceplane Sierra Space refers to as DC-200, but we can't dismiss the possibility that it could be a new crew vehicle. Why do I say this? Last year in an interview, Vice said, "Right now, we're focused on getting a new Dream Chaser ready in the 26 timeframe. There's still a lot of work to do on the DC-200, but we're still very focused on that." While this doesn't directly address Reverence, the time frame around 2026 is coincidental. Therefore, we still hope for official info from the company about Reverence shortly. Now, let's refresh our spirits and return to the first flight of Dream Chaser. Once Tenacity hits 80% completion mark for spaceflight readiness, how will it approach and dock with the ISS? After Tenacity and Shooting Star complete their final environmental testing at Armstrong, NASA will ship the spaceplane to Kennedy to start loading and prepping him for launch. Tenacity's hitching a ride to LEO packed inside a payload fairing of ULA's Vulcan rocket. Here are the main phases of Tenacity's mission to and from the ISS. As a first step, with wings folded in and mated with Shooting Star, Tenacity will launch in a 5-meter fairing atop a ULA Vulcan. Next, the payload fairing separates and the Centaur portion of the rocket pushes Tenacity into orbit. Third, from a lower and faster orbit, Tenacity catches up with the International Space Station until it's in the station's R-bar, a point directly between Earth and the space station. The ISS guides Tenacity until it can retrieve the spacecraft with its arm. Fourth step, after unloading and reloading Tenacity and Shooting Star 35 to 75 days later, the spacecraft pushes off from the ISS and Shooting Star detaches for eventual burn-up upon re-entry. And finally, approaching from a route over the west coast in Central America, Tenacity re-enters the atmosphere at 17,000 miles an hour and effectively glides into a landing at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This flight is not pivotal just for Sierra Space, but for the future of space transportation. Dream Chaser's first mission will showcase its unique design and capabilities, distinguishing it from other cargo spacecraft like SpaceX's Cargo Dragon and Northrop Grumman's Cygnus. Unlike traditional capsules, the Dream Chaser is a winged spaceplane that can land on conventional runways, a feature that promises gentler payload recovery and broader operational flexibility. Its ability to return uncrewed payloads to Earth fills a critical gap in the existing infrastructure, where only the Cargo Dragon currently offers this functionality. This capability is especially valuable for transporting delicate scientific experiments or specialized hardware requiring rapid analysis or reuse. The Dream Chaser's additional redundancy ensures that critical resupply missions to the ISS stay uninterrupted in the case of unexpected failures with the Falcon 9 rocket or other spacecraft. As Sierra Space preps for the Dream Chaser's first flight, its innovative approach is a testament to the increasing diversity in space exploration solutions. Beyond its immediate role in ISS resupply missions, Dream Chaser is poised to support a wide array of future applications, including transporting payloads for private companies, conducting microgravity experiments, and even serving as a platform for orbital manufacturing. Looking ahead, Dream Chaser represents a significant step towards building a robust and sustainable space economy. In the meantime, all eyes are on Sierra Space as the Dream Chaser progresses through its final testing phases. Success in its first mission would not only validate years of innovation and development, but also position Sierra Space as a key player in the future of space logistics. While challenges remain, Dream Chaser holds the promise of redefining how humanity accesses and utilizes space. For now, the world waits with anticipation to see whether this groundbreaking spacecraft can meet its ambitious goals and deliver on its immense potential. In a stunning demonstration of technological prowess, SpaceX has once again pushed the boundaries of space exploration, transforming routine rocket launches into a symphony of engineering excellence. Falcon 9, already a rock star, has etched another victorious chapter in the annals of aerospace history. Just a couple weeks back, SpaceX launched a batch of Starlink V2 mini satellites from Kennedy in Florida aboard a Falcon 9, marking the vehicle's 400th successful mission. Additionally, this milestone represented the 375th booster recovery in the Falcon program, according to SpaceX. The spectacle didn't end there, though. With this mission, the company shattered its previous turnaround record for booster reuse, reducing the time from landing to relaunch to just 13 days and 12 hours, down from the previous 21 days. This achievement left even the most seasoned aerospace engineers in awe. The payloads for these two launches included additional Starlink internet satellites and two Starshield satellites, customized versions of Starlink for the DoD. This brought SpaceX's Falcon 9 launches in November to an unprecedented total of 16, a new record for the company. Additionally, SpaceX launched its bigger Starship rocket once last month. The previous record for Falcon 9 monthly launches was 14. Kiko Donchev, SpaceX's VP of Launch, celebrated the accomplishment with a bold promise for the final month of 2024. Congrats to the SpaceX team for completing 16 Falcon plus one Starship launch in November. Wow, 15 launches left in 2024 with 32 days to go. So far this year, SpaceX has conducted 119 Falcon 9 launches, averaging one every 2.3 days. This already surpasses its previous annual record of 92 Falcon 9 launches set last year. If SpaceX achieves its goal of 15 more Falcon 9 launches this month, the company will complete 134 flights for the year. Adding two Falcon Heavy missions to that brings the total to 136. This number is particularly significant when compared to historical space exploration efforts. Over 3 decades, NASA's Space Shuttle completed 135 missions. Furthermore, SpaceX's launch cadence and performance data highlight its dominance in the global launch market. In 2023, SpaceX far outpaced major space agencies and launch providers, surpassing Roscosmos for the first time since 2013, ULA since 2010, and Arianespace since 2009. In fact, Falcon 9 has flown more missions this year than legendary rockets like Ariane 4, Ariane 5, and Atlas V did in their entire operational lifetimes. However, SpaceX's journey's not been without challenges. In July, a second-stage failure led to the loss of 20 Starlink satellites, marking the company's first launch failure since a pad explosion in 2016. In August, an attempted booster landing also failed, underscoring the complex and risky nature of rocket launches and reusable technology. Despite these setbacks, the company's achievements in booster reusability remain groundbreaking. For instance, Booster 1067 completed its 23rd flight last month during the KoreaSat 62 mission, showcasing the remarkable engineering behind SpaceX's reusable rocket technology and its potential to drastically reduce the cost of spaceflight. Yet reusing boosters is only part of SpaceX's vision. The company is also advancing the Starship program, aiming for a fully reusable rocket system. This innovation promises to maximize launch frequency while minimizing costs, bringing space travel within reach of a broader audience. As Elon envisions, journeys beyond Earth won't remain the exclusive domain of billionaires. However, this has led many to believe that Starship, SpaceX's rapidly advancing rocket, will soon completely replace the Falcon 9. But is this assumption on the right track? Starship's a rocket and spacecraft with unique capabilities, including full reusability and the ability to carry a significant payload of cargo and people to space. Many speculate that Starship will eventually take over from the current rocket systems like Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and Dragon spacecraft. This is indeed likely, especially since SpaceX President Gwynne Shotwell has officially stated that Starship will represent a transformative milestone for the company by the end of the decade. However, we must emphasize that Falcon 9 is unlikely to get phased out easily, even after Starship goes operational. The first reason lies in the demand for commercial contracts in the future. Currently, Falcon 9 launches account for about 40% of SpaceX's total launches, including Starlink missions. These launches typically involve smaller satellites that are well suited for Falcon 9. Additionally, Falcon 9 often serves as a rideshare platform, accommodating multiple small payloads from various providers in a single launch. This reflects the fact that the current satellite launch market does not yet require large payload capacities. As a result, missions that demand larger payloads and the higher costs associated with rockets like Falcon Heavy are relatively rare. Even when Starship becomes operational and capable of carrying astronauts into space, the market for big payloads is unlikely to develop rapidly. Thus, Falcon 9 will remain the perfect choice for most satellite and small payload missions undertaken by organizations around the world. Notably, in her statement, SpaceX Pres Shotwell mentioned Starship replacing Falcon Heavy and Dragon, but made no reference to Falcon 9. This may seem like a minor detail, but it could offer significant insight for rocket enthusiasts like us. After all, even small remarks like this can hint at the strategic plans of SpaceX, showing that Falcon 9 may still play an important role in the company's operations for years to come. The second reason many believe Falcon 9 can maintain its position lies in the ongoing challenges Starship faces in balancing technical feasibility and cost efficiency. While Starship represents a revolutionary leap in rocket technology, it still has numerous hurdles to overcome before it can consistently achieve reusability and lower launch costs. Critics point to several unresolved issues, such as the complexities involved in catching the Starship in Super Heavy booster with Mechazoa. This action was notably bypassed during Starship's Flight 6. This decision led to widespread disappointment among enthusiasts and raised questions about the readiness of the technology. Additional concerns include the reusability of critical components like the Raptor engines and the heat shield. Both systems face significant wear and tear during launch and reentry, making rapid turnaround for subsequent flights challenging. Observers noted these difficulties in Starship's most recent attempts to return after a launch. That is true. In the worst-case scenario for Starship, its operational costs and flight cadence may not be low enough to replace Falcon 9. However, SpaceX has made it clear that its ultimate goal is not to perfect a single working design, but to significantly reduce the cost of launches. If achieving this requires fundamental changes to the design, they're willing to make them. Therefore, the real worst case for Starship is simply a longer timeline and more iterations to achieve its objectives. From a technical perspective, these challenges are not insurmountable. The warp nozzles are a solvable engineering problem, and the boosters damaged from aerodynamic forces provide valuable data for future reinforcement. The introduction of Raptor 3 significantly enhances the system's overall capabilities and resilience. The heat shield has demonstrated remarkable performance, with Starship successfully executing complex maneuvers that would have been catastrophic for previous spacecraft like the Space Shuttle. At this stage, the question is not whether Starship will work, but when it will be perfected. Right now, SpaceX has developed a super heavy launch system with 2 flawless ascents. However, calling it a system might be an oversimplification. It's more accurately described as a sophisticated collection of interconnected, adaptable components. The most valuable outcomes of the Starship development program extend far beyond the rocket itself. 1. The Raptor engine family represents a breakthrough in rocket propulsion, offering unprecedented thrust-to-weight ratios. 2. The orbital launch mount, OLM, and tower design have proven incredibly efficient, with continuous improvements based on rigorous testing and analysis. 3. Star Factory stands as potentially the most rapid rocket production facility globally, enabling unprecedented manufacturing speed and flexibility. 4. Paradoxically, the rocket itself is arguably the least critical component. SpaceX has demonstrated the ability to rapidly iterate and redesign. If a fundamental architectural flaw were discovered, they could develop an entirely new design and have it flying in 6 months. In the end, even if the current Starship design presents challenges, SpaceX has gained invaluable knowledge, technology, and manufacturing capabilities that far surpass any single prototype. Their real strength doesn't lie in a specific design, but in their innovative approach to aerospace engineering and their ability to rapidly adapt and evolve technology. While the Starship is still in the early stages of development, Falcon 9 remains a rocket that defines SpaceX's legacy, earning admiration from other organizations, particularly NASA. The space agency's leveraged Falcon 9's partial reusability to great effect in missions, showcasing its trust in SpaceX's engineering. Of particular note is the fact that NASA, a leading space agency with a history of iconic space exploration projects like the Apollo missions, the Space Shuttle program, and the Mars rover, now relies on SpaceX for missions ranging from resupplying the ISS to launching cutting-edge scientific payloads. The use of Falcon 9 represents not only a technological triumph for SpaceX, but also a shift in the broader space industry, where private companies now play a pivotal role in advancing space exploration. But this collaboration raises an intriguing question. Why hasn't NASA, an agency with unparalleled expertise and resources, developed their own reusable rockets? Traditional rocket designs were built as throwaway systems, a practice rooted in the early days of space exploration. At the time, most civilian rockets were repurposed intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, engineered for single-use missions. This approach was understandable during the infancy of space technology, but became entrenched due to its benefits to established institutions like NASA. The continuous production of expendable rockets kept assembly lines active and funding streams flowing, providing no incentive for change. For decades, NASA argued that recoverable boosters were either impossible, impractical, or financially unsustainable. Disposable rockets were not only cheaper to make, but also ensured a steady demand for replacement hardware after each launch. This predictable cycle secured a consistent cash flow, which could then be redirected into administrative overhead or other bureaucratic needs. Like many federal agencies, NASA thrived on this budgetary model, allowing its bureaucracy to expand alongside its expenditures. SpaceX disrupted this status quo by embracing reusability out of necessity. Unlike NASA, SpaceX, as a private company, had to prioritize profitability to sustain its operations. Elon's vision hinged on recoverable boosters to reduce costs drastically. By reusing rockets, SpaceX could offer launch services for a fraction of the cost charged by traditional NASA contractors, all while staying profitable, even when renting NASA's launch facilities. The Falcon 9's key innovation lies in its ability to land, be refurbished quickly and inexpensively, and then reused. This design philosophy mirrors the technology of consumer drones, which can autonomously return to their operators. While landing a rocket is significantly more complex than landing a $100 drone, the economic and operational benefits are monumental. Elon and SpaceX set out to revolutionize the space launch industry by treating rockets more like airliners: recoverable, refuelable, and reliable for repeated use. Initially, they estimated that breaking even would require 10 flights a booster. Today, several Falcon 9 boosters have flown at least 19 times with no signs of slowing down. SpaceX has put itself far ahead of the competition in terms of reusability and cost efficiency. This year alone, they achieved around 30 reusable launches, while competitors like Blue Origin and legacy aerospace companies are working towards similar capabilities. None have yet matched Falcon 9's track record. SpaceX is already testing its second-gen Starship system, a more powerful, cost-effective, reusable rocket and spacecraft, while no other company has even reached Falcon-class reusability. In the legal and competitive landscape, SpaceX's dominance is clear. The phrase "no lo contendere, no contest" aptly describes the state of competition. While companies like Blue Origin or other startups may one day rise to challenge SpaceX effectively, the odds are slim. Betting against SpaceX at this point feels like a long shot, unamusing gamble, but one unlikely to pay off. That's all for today's